The local currency. It is called Vietnamese dong. I'm gonna have trouble saying that on camera, calling it dong. There were some people that we talked to that said they weren't doing it because of price. It's $10 a person. If $10 to do a tour is an issue, just close out the video.
Yeah, this is not the video for you.
Cheers.
Cheers. Welcome to Ninh Binh, specifically Hang Mua. This is one of the most beautiful areas of Vietnam that we've been to so far, even though it's like the second place we've been, but it's absolutely stunning.
It's a beautiful but a rainy day. We did not get as lucky as we could have with the weather, which has been unfortunate, but it's still absolutely stunning. And the goal of today's video is to tell you everything you need to know before you book and some of the things we wish we'd known before we came, which we really want to make sure you get the most out of this place you can because it really surprised us how much we liked it.
So first things first, beer. So,
cheers.
Cheers. A staple of Vietnam is the beer.
It is. It's really a staple only because it's the only thing you can get.
Yeah, it's really like one of the few alcoholic drinks that is also like 20 cents. You know, most cocktails are like, like $5, $6, but beer, very reliable.
It's one of the advantages here in Ninh Binh is for sure the beer has been great prices. I mean, ridiculously great prices. Like 7,000, what are they called?
Like 7,000 dong.
Dong, what they're called? Yeah. Okay,
it's like
so
29 cents.
I'm gonna have trouble saying that on camera, I'll be honest.
I know.
Calling it dong. that's anyway, that is what
it's
called. It is called Vietnamese dong. The currency, it's 7,000 of the local currency.
Moving on from the dong.
Moving on from the dong. But what that translates to, so 24 to 25,000 depending, is about $1 US. So essentially that's like 30-cent beer, 25-cent beer.
And speaking of how cheap it is anyway, Ninh Binh itself is actually really cheap. And most people when they're traveling to Vietnam or going to some of the main tourist areas like Hanoi or Phu Quoc or some of those areas, I'm definitely butchering the name, so sorry about that. But Ninh Binh, I had never even heard of it. And actually Delightful Travelers, Ann and Trevor, who you might have seen on some of our videos before, they told us about it and we were like, well, obviously we need to go because they fell in love. I'm actually really glad we came.
I'm super glad we came. I think the thing they didn't tell us though was how long we should be here.
Yes.
And I think it was a little bit undersold. Not undersold just by them, but undersold by everyone in general because we've read through blogs and we read through all kinds of things. And there's a lot of day trips that leave to the Ninh Binh area from Hanoi. And so they take you here, you kind of get a taste of some of the small things, but in reality, you could spend a week here easily.
Yeah, I mean, I think we spent like 8 hours yesterday just like running from thing to thing, and we didn't even make it to the Mua Cave where we're sitting right now because it was so crazy to just get around and so much to sightsee. But this area is amazing, and I think I would love to come back here for probably 5 to 7 days, honestly.
Yeah, I think there's a caveat in there, right? What are your personal preferences? For us, we like nature, we like seeing really historic sites and temples and photographs, right? We love taking photographs, obviously. It's been a great place to take photographs. So I think there's a lot in it for us personally. And it also reminds us one of our favorite places that we've ever been in China, an area called Yangchua, which is close to Guilin. Very similar vibe. It has the karst formations, it has the rivers, you take the boats everywhere. And so for us, there's kind of a nostalgia there. So I think that's a caveat. I think if you're interested in just kind of like quickly seeing a site, you're more interested in the city life in Vietnam, or you're more interested in staying in kind of like a resort down on the beaches and you just want to get a cultural taste, then I think maybe stopping in for a night or two is probably okay. I wouldn't do the day trips though.
No, I wouldn't do the day trip, and you're literally sitting on a bus usually for 2.5 hours just to spend like 3 hours here, which I just don't think it does this place justice personally. But, you know, on that note, speaking of how to get here, I've realized in Vietnam, there's basically 3 ways to get like anywhere. There's flying and trains, which goes to some places. And then most of the time, you're either taking a bus or a private car. The buses are fascinating for me because they're basically limousines and you have these like lay flat, bus seats if you're spending $35 a person. But it's essentially the same price as getting a private car if you're like 2 people. you're spending $70 one way or the other. But if you're taking the tour, you're just coming for a few hours and spending most of that time in that lay flat bus seat.
I also think it's worth noting that the tours are pretty hit or miss.
Yes.
So we haven't actually pulled the trigger on a tour yet, and that's mostly because we've been observing other tours. And there've been a handful of guides that I wanted to eavesdrop on and listen to because it sounded like they were telling interesting stories and their English was good, or linguistically they were good. I mean, we actually heard a lot of multilingual guides that I was quite surprised by how good they were in Spanish and French and languages like that. So that was quite impressive. But we've also heard a lot of really bad guides.
Yeah.
They have a mixed group of people where everybody's speaking a different language, so they're trying to speak English, but the English is not very good, and it just kind of seems like it's not worth it. If we were in that situation, we probably would have honestly just left the group.
Yeah,
just wandered around.
I agree, and I think my personal recommendation would definitely be to come to spend a night or two at a minimum and do some research on the tours. You know, asking a hotel is fine, depending on where you stay, I guess, but it is so hit or miss. So I think if going into it next time, I think I would go on Viator, honestly, or like a tour site, like look up on TripAdvisor, some of the best tours in the area.
And book a private tour.
Yeah, and just book a private tour with one of those companies that is highly rated, because kind of the entire point is to see and understand what is here if you are spending the time to do it and the money to come here. So that's my personal recommendation.
I think there's an important caveat that if you're a backpacker and you stumbled on this channel and you're listening to our little conversation here, this is probably not the channel for you. At the end of the day, we cater mostly to luxury travelers and people that aren't on a budget. The costs are negligible to hire a private car here.
Yeah.
If you're on a backpacking budget, some of the tours might be more costly, but at the end of the day, a lot of them aren't. If you're spending, $20 per person to get on one of these tours, yesterday we hired a driver for $50 for two of us. So if we'd been on the bus, it would have cost us $40. We hired a driver, it was $50. Granted, he wasn't the best driver.
Oh my God.
That was a little bit of a miss.
Terrible. You know, you ask us who not to hire, and we can happily tell you.
So far, we are better on who not to hire in Vietnam than we are to hire.
Yeah.
I think that's
fair.
a fair caveat, though, right?
Yeah, it is.
If you are a backpacker, we're probably not going to give you the best advice.
That's true. Yeah, and speaking of hotels, hotels, favorite things. So we, backing up, we took a private car down to Ninh Binh from Hanoi. It was about just over 2 hours of a drive. I booked a hotel pretty last minute on hotels.com. It was super cheap, $60 a night for what when we showed up was like their VIP room, the panoramic room. We stayed a little bit out of town. I really liked it because they had the free bikes and it was super quiet, literally in this rice paddy. It was this tiny hotel, 12 rooms. But there are a few options I think I'd recommend overall in Ninh Binh. There's kind of like 3 options. I would say if you're trying to hit all the highlights, I'd say there's, where we stayed if you want quiet, a little pool, easy access to town. So that was Coco Villas. Hidden Charm is the second one. That one's like closer to town. You can walk into town. Still very nice, but kind of more corporate, which is why we didn't book it. And then there's Emeralda, which is the most expensive option, but it's literally in town where a lot of the activities happen, in the restaurants. So those are probably the 3. And we'll link those in the description below too.
I think an important caveat here is Tom Kok is the town. So when we talk about Ninh Binh is actually a city.
Yeah.
And it's quite an industrialized city. But Tom Kok is the actual kind of cool town. Some people describe it as touristy. It's touristy in the sense that there are a lot of shops and bars and things like that.
Massage
but it also
parlors.
has massage parlors. All the massages. Yeah. Oh, God. There's nothing better than going through one of these entire days of hiking and tours and your butt hurts because you're not used to riding a bicycle. And going into one of these places and getting an amazing massage. Oh, my calves from yesterday, there were so many stairs.
Yeah.
This world of ski. Well, we'll talk about attractions in a second because there are some key attractions that we saw and there's some key attractions that we didn't see. But the point about Tom Kok is I think it's pretty cool. Would I want to stay directly in town at night? We were in town decently late last night, about 10 p.m. and it seemed like it was shutting down. Yeah, it seemed like the rowdiness was kind of over because people go out on the tours, they do that whole thing, and then 30-cent beer, you can pretty much get a pretty early night if you sit down and have too many of those.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Another important thing to understand here is I had the 30-cent beer in Tom Kok. Marin's beer was 10x what I paid. She had the craft IPA because she won't drink anything but IPAs.
Listen,
and I had the local beer.
I can't drink just bad beer. Like right now, like this is like, I mean, it's not bad.
Hanoi's not bad. Hanoi, come on, hold
It's
on.
fine.
Hanoi's not bad.
It's fine.
There's a surprising amount of local domestic beers, ranging from like, not so good to pretty all right. I think Hanoi thus far is my favorite, and Tiger is obviously imported, but then Tiger is probably my other regional favorite.
Yeah,
that you can
that's
find
fair.
pretty much everywhere.
But yeah, definitely staying in town is convenient if you don't want to like take a taxi back and forth. But the taxi, which was probably 6-7 minutes to our hotel, was only, what is 70,000? Couple bucks, $4.
70,000 is like three and a half dollars.
$3.50. So, and we had a really nice driver. DM us for his number because he was great. But he was great. Took us in 5 minutes. He would be there to pick us up. So for me, I kind of tend to prefer quiet, and I don't know how rowdy Tomcock gets.
Our hotel wasn't that far. It was 5 minutes by car, and biking, I think it was like 15.
Yeah, and I mean, there's tons of kind of lower end hotels too, but for $50 to $70, you're getting a pretty nice place. And then Emerald, I tried to book that one, but the only room they had left was like the presidential suite, and it was like $300. So. I was just not sure about that one.
I think if you can get it for around 100,
100 would be good.
Ish. I think that'd be a good price for that hotel. I don't know that I'd pay more because it wasn't like the rooms were amazing, at least from photos, right? We didn't go to the hotel, but there were some questionable photos. It's also like location-wise, it is during the day. It's a great location because it's right on the water in the area where they do what's called like the short boat tour. But the short boat tour is a lot of people.
So many people all the time.
So
oh my
many
gosh.
people.
It was crazy.
I mean, it's a lot of people.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're going, and we can kind of transition to the attractions because it's a good time because, if you're staying in Tomcock, you're actually leaving the town to go to most of the attractions anyway. If you're coming for a night and you're leaving kind of early the next day,
Stay in Tomcock.
Definitely stay in Tomcock. Do the little short boat trip. But otherwise, you're driving pretty far out of town to get to Trang On, which is the longer boat, to get to some of the caves and some of the historical sites. So honestly, the location of your hotel doesn't really matter.
I think it's an important thing to say too that if you were going to spend multiple nights, so like our ideal scenario, I think we've decided is we probably would have spent about 6 nights and done 2 nights close by Tomcock, 2 nights at a hotel that's kind of closer to
the national
parks in that area that's up in the north, which unfortunately we didn't get to see, which is too bad. And maybe 2 nights somewhere in between, right? There's a couple kind of larger resorts in this area that have some interesting ideas.
Yeah, like there's a Wyndham up by the national park. There's a Wyndham everywhere in the world. Like honestly, if you can dream it, there's a Wyndham. Honestly, it's so weird. But there's a very nice Wyndham with kind of overwater.
Cool rooms.
Yeah, like overwater bungalows. Like I would totally stay there.
Yeah.
But that is pretty far. That's like an hour, I think, just about to Tomcock.
But it's far from here.
Yeah,
but it's not far
if you're visiting that
things
part.
To see, right? So like the national park thing. There are over 20 different species of primate in this area.
20.
And there's all kinds of interesting things. I mean, there's like lizards and bears. There's bears.
So if you have, let's say you have 2 days to explore, what are your highlights?
100% the boat tour. I think missing the boat tour.
The Trang On one?
Yeah, the Trang On.
That's a mistake.
Yeah, don't do the short boat tour. I mean, if the only thing you can do is the short boat tour, do that. At least that's better than not doing it.
Yeah.
There were some people that we talked to that said they weren't doing it because of price. It's $10 a person.
Yeah.
Again, this is my point about the backpacker thing. Like, if $10 to do a tour is an issue, just close out the video.
This is not the video for you.
Like, the Trang On boat trip is fabulous.
Yeah, I agree. But kind of a bougie add-on. So the boats actually hold 4 people, well, plus a kid. If there's a kid, you could actually have 5 people on the boat. And we almost ended up on a boat with a family. But if you pay for the extra people, you can have your own boat.
Yeah.
And they're so small. And honestly, like even just sitting with you on the boat, it was, it gets a little tight. So having strangers in the boat, then you can't really take your time at the sites because you stop along the way. So I think it's 100% worth paying the extra like $20 or.
Yeah, we paid for 4 tickets, so it was an extra $20 to just get the entire boat to ourselves.
And I don't regret that.
Not even for a second. Granted, we also have camera gear.
Yeah.
And so moving around camera gear and doing all that, but it was just more comfortable too. I could sit facing you.
Yeah.
We could talk. We could move around the boat.
We could drink our beer.
We could drink beer. It made for a very pleasant experience rather than being crammed in. They do force you to wear life preservers, which It's a little annoying. She was at times insistent that we put them back on.
Yes.
So, but that, you know, you get the life preservers on, you're there, you're crammed in with 4 other people on this little boat. We're going to do it over again. We would definitely do the same thing.
Yeah, I agree. We did one thing right on this trip, which was that.
We did, yeah.
And
we've done a couple things right. I feel like in terms of maximizing our experience, even here in Ninh Binh, we did pretty well, weather considered.
Yeah, that's true. And, you know, I think the key too is how busy this area can get. So we had heard that the Trang An boat trip gets pretty crowded in the afternoon, kind of like what we saw with the shorter boat trip. So I liked what we did with them starting the morning with the boat tour. And also, honestly, like, I don't know how we would have handled it in the afternoon anyway, because it got dark so fast. You know, we would have ended up on the boat trip in the dark. So personally, I liked the morning for that, but that was by far my favorite too.
There's 3 different routes that you can choose from, and we picked the third one, which had the longest tunnel, which was amazing. And the tunnel, it's like a cave, a cavern. You go through the cavern. It's beautiful. It's lit. The navigation is incredible that they can go through there without ever getting the boat.
It's 1,000 meters long.
Yeah, I mean 1,000 meters long. Like, that's insane. That was the part I think that surprised me the most of the boat tour, because I was looking forward to being on the river and seeing the karst. And then when we went into that cave,
yeah,
that was really cool.
That was amazing.
So the one we did had 3 temples,
yeah,
I think.
Yeah.
And I think we chose the right one. There's 2 others you can do. From looking at the map and studying them closely, I would say either do number 1 or number 3. Because number 1 had more caves and kind of went to like maybe a little further, it felt like, at least on the map. I don't know if it actually goes physically further.
It just spent like more time inside. There's like more caves, but so you had more scenery on Route 3, but more kind of caves and cool, you know, little.
And I think you had one
things.
different temple.
Yeah.
The thing is, though, the temple that you see on the third tour is, I think, one of the coolest temples.
Yes.
Because culturally, it's really significant, too. It was started by one of the first emperors in Vietnam, and it's nestled inside of these karsts, and it's you essentially can only access it by these caves on this river. I mean, in terms of a defensible position, it's
incredible.
It's incredible.
And imagine like building that temple. I mean, just in the middle of nowhere.
In the middle of nowhere. And the logistics of getting everything there and building it. There's an interesting thing about temples in Vietnam. They're preserved is maybe not the right word. They're rebuilt, right? Like they have preserved, but they've also just continued to add on to them and build them and make sure that they kind of maintain their integrity. I think it was interesting having gone to Hanoi and seen the Temple of Literature in Hanoi, Confucius's Temple of Literature, and what that structure was, and then coming here and getting to see the temple in Trang An and how it was the same layout. They had the same steels. Is that what they're called? The steels, which are so cool. They're these like tablets that are on top of turtles, kind of commemorate someone's
study.
Work. Their study, their work, their body of work. It's more of like an academic thing. But I thought that was really cool. I thought that was one of the highlights.
I agree. I totally
of how different it was between the one in Hanoi that did have more impact, I think, from years of war and traffic and just being in a major city, to this that's just perfectly preserved in this small little valley that is inaccessible.
That's amazing.
It was one of the highlights.
I
think
agree.
we're rambling a little bit about Trang An.
I know, but it's so nice
But
there.
I think for sure one of the highlights. Don't miss it.
The other thing I wouldn't miss either is Bai Dinh. That was incredible. And I don't know, I didn't do enough research before we came because it was kind of last minute. Thank God for Ann and Trevor for telling us about this place, but didn't do any research. I thought Bai Dinh would just be this like small little temple. Turns out it is gigantic, and it's a huge mix of old and new. That alone, though, I would spend a day doing because it was so big, and it was just the most incredible place. And after seeing the Trang An temples, you realize it's like a significantly larger version of that, and some of it is more modern day, but it was amazing. And the tickets there, don't make this mistake, they have 2 different tickets. You can buy one ticket that you just walk in, you walk, and then the other ticket has like a shuttle bus thing. And they don't really tell you like that much about it, but we did the shuttle bus one because it looked kind of far on the map, and it was so far. If you don't spend the extra like 20 cents, you have to walk like a mile and a half to get to the temple.
It is extremely hard to describe how big Bai Dinh is. I mean, it is massive. Like, it's huge.
Yeah.
And I guess that brings us back to the whole reasoning around why you should spend multiple days here. It's because if you come here for a day and you try to do Trang An, which is a 3-hour tour by itself, and Bai Dinh, they say, is 2 hours.
Yeah, no. We spent like 4.5 hours there.
They said it was 2 hours by electric bus, but you don't want to take the electric bus the whole time, because that was another thing, because then you miss out. Like there was an area where we could go from one point to another point and take the electric car, but if we'd taken the electric car, we would have missed Tunnel of Buddhas, or the Hall of Buddhas, or whatever that was. That like endless hall of all those Buddha statues, which I thought was the single best part of Bai Dinh.
Yeah, I agree. It was incredible.
I think that would have been a really missed opportunity to not give us
And honestly, if you don't get off at some of the stops, you also miss, or even go farther, like kind of up into the hills where there's a couple little things on the map. You miss out on some of the most incredible views. Not that we literally hadn't.
We didn't quite have views.
No views. But you, in theory, would miss out on some of the best views if you just kind of took that bus around. Because you kind of have to walk to get to the views. So that alone, I think, its own day. And I just don't know if it would be worth going if you're only dedicating like an hour or two to it, honestly. I'd probably just skip it because it wouldn't even be worth the ticket.
It wouldn't be worth the ticket.
Yeah. And then the third thing that I think is a big deal here, which unfortunately we're not really going to get to take advantage of today with the weather.
We're at the base of it.
We're at the base of it right now, is the Mua Cave and Dragon Mountain. Dragon Mountain isn't it's like Insta famous. It has this beautiful like kind of staircase that leads up to this little point. And you've definitely seen it if you looked at videos or reels of Vietnam, but it is not a thing to do today.
It's very cool. It's 500 steps. Although the weather is clearing up.
It's not.
It's not, is it? It's raining.
It's pouring rain. But there is also a cave here, Mua Cave. It is going to be the most crowded place. It's really close to town. It's one of the most crowded, popular tour destinations. Pretty small. So that is something to keep in mind. I'd say I hit that really early in the morning and do that hike, and then go to a massage after.
The Dragon Mountain thing is definitely a don't miss.
Yeah.
I would say if we were going to plan this over again, we would probably come in on day one, and if you get here around like noonish, you do Mua Cave and the Dragon.
It takes like 2.5 hours.
Yeah, you Mua Cave, the Dragon Mountain, climb to the top, then go into Tom Kok, drink, have some nice food. Massage, exactly. Then the next day, probably do a combination of Trang An and First Capital.
Yeah.
Combine those two together. And then the third day, do Bai Dinh.
Yeah.
And you could probably move to one of those more northern hotels if you were going to move hotels to go do that.
Yeah.
Because then you get closer to those national parks, and that's where you tack on the extra days if that's something you're interested in exploring.
Yeah.
There's endless temples here. I mean, in terms of Buddhism, there's a lot of very significant sites for Buddhism culturally, the Chinese culturally, the Vietnamese culturally. Like, there's a lot of very significant sites in and around this area.
Yeah, so I guess the end of the day, the real question is, was it worth coming? Even with this weather?
100% worth it.
Yeah.
100% worth it. The photos and the videos, which is a big reason that we, are here, they're not going to win any awards. Let's put it that way.
No, but you did a great job.
Yeah, I appreciate that. We honestly, we didn't have, really didn't have the best weather. It was a little bit disappointing to get to the top of the pagoda. The pagoda is so tall and has such a stunning view. And we got up there. I think that's why we don't want to Dragon Mountain today. It's the same reason. So you could get to the top and the whole thing is the view. And
it was so disappointing. But to the question of is it worth it? I think it's worth coming. I would just do things a little bit differently if I knew the weather was going to be so bad. Yeah. I think to your point, like I would have done Dragon Mountain on day one just to get it out of the way because it's supposed to be amazing. And if you have some sun, just do it.
Take advantage of it while you have it.
Yeah. The second day, do some of those tours. And if it rains, I would do Bai Dinh at night because they do have a night tour, which I think is an important call out. Like we did it during the day and it was fine because, it is some of it's inside.
If we had known that would have been the move.
From 5 to 7, they have a evening tour, and it lights up and it's absolutely beautiful. And
once they lit it up, when we were leaving as they were lighting it up, and we looked around and we were like, "Damn it!"
Yeah,
because it looked so cool.
Yeah, it was really cool. So yeah, that's probably what I would plan for. But I love it here. I want to come back. We have to come back because we have to do Dragon Mountain one day.
I think another thing to understand too is one of the reasons I think we would want to come for a longer period of time is because of the biking. You can bike everywhere.
Yeah.
And I think on a lot of these trips, we would have preferred, rather than having a car take us around, if we'd had the extra time, it would have just been great to bike.
Yeah.
I mean, you're biking 15, 16 kilometers to get to some of the further out areas. So maybe round trip in a day, you're looking at like a 50, 60 kilometer bike ride by the time you kind of hit a couple sites. But if you really like cycling, I think it's a great opportunity to cycle. I think that's probably one of the things we would do better on our next trip too.
Yeah.
But we'll definitely come back.
We'll definitely come back. So on that note, we should get on to our next destination, Halong Bay.
I'm very excited about Halong Bay.
Me too. So stay tuned for that. And if you follow us on Instagram, you will already have seen most of our experience here in Ninh Binh and Hanoi previously. If you don't already, be sure to follow us at Voyager Guru. And if you don't already, subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can be alerted to all of the new videos. This is a very new format for us with this kind of podcast style, but I don't know.
Totally new.
We always like talk so much to each other about all these thoughts that we have, and
just decided to film it. Why not?
Decided to film our conversation. So if you do like it, be sure to give us a thumbs up and let us know in the comments.
People think that it doesn't help. It helps so much. It helps our videos get more exposure. It helps us produce more videos like this. Helps us find brands to work with. It's extremely helpful. So be sure to do that. And
as always, I'm Marin.
And I'm Max.
And we're Voyager Guru. See you out there. Cheers.